Country music has given the world unforgettable voices, stories carved straight from real American life, and legends who shaped the sound of an entire nation. But behind the harmonies, the cowboy hats, and the glow of the spotlight lies a much darker reality, one that fans rarely see. Fame can polish an image, but it cannot hide the flaws of the people who stand behind the microphone. Not every artist who sings about heartbreak and honesty carries a clean soul. Some of the biggest names in country built reputations not just through chart-topping hits, but through tempers that flared, scandals that erupted, and feuds that scarred friendships forever. The world remembers their music, but the industry remembers the chaos they left behind. These are not stories of glory or charming Southern charisma. These are the raw, uncomfortable truths about artists whose behavior became louder than their lyrics. Their fame couldn't save them. Their success couldn't shield them, and the public eye only magnified their mistakes. From explosive controversies to moments that shook the entire country music community, these figures became symbols of how quickly admiration can turn into outrage. Join us as we uncover the hidden reality behind the 10 most awful personalities in country music. Stories that reveal how complicated, messy, and deeply human the people behind the songs truly are. Morgan Wallen's rise began with the kind of story country fans love to believe in: small-town roots, a Tennessee upbringing, and a raw Southern voice that felt both rebellious and familiar. Competing on The Voice gave him his first exposure, but it was his fusion of country storytelling with pop and rock energy that transformed him into one of the genre's modern giants. Albums like Dangerous, the double album, and One Thing at a Time didn't just succeed, they dominated, pulling in listeners far beyond the traditional country crowd. Fans connected to him because his songs echoed their own lives. Heartbreaks that still stung, nights that went on too long, and quiet moments spent in small towns where dreams often feel too big. His charm was rough-edged, his image unpolished, and that authenticity made him irresistible. But it also came with consequences. Wallen's public persona frequently mirrored the volatility of his sound: reckless nights, drunken missteps, and a refusal to behave like a sanitized celebrity. For years, those antics added to his mystique. Then, in early 2021, everything changed. A neighbor's camera captured Wallen using a racial slur outside his Nashville home. The footage spread across the internet with explosive speed, igniting outrage not just within country music but across the entire entertainment industry. Radio stations pulled his songs overnight. His label suspended him. Commentators predicted the collapse of his career. Yet the aftermath revealed something deeper: a cultural fracture within country music itself. While executives scrambled to distance themselves, fans surged to his defense. His album shot back to the top of streaming charts, breaking records even as the controversy intensified. Some argued he deserved redemption. Others said his success exposed systemic problems, that the industry could reward controversy rather than condemn it. Wallen apologized publicly, entered a rehabilitation program, and promised to learn from the moment that nearly ended everything he had built. His return was both expected and fiercely debated. Supporters saw growth, critics saw an industry too willing to forgive. The debate over accountability versus second chances became inseparable from his name. Yet despite the turmoil, Morgan Wallen continued to release hit after hit. His music dominated radio and streaming platforms, influencing the entire modern landscape of country sound. His controversies forced the genre to confront uncomfortable conversations about race, responsibility, and the culture surrounding its biggest stars. Morgan Wallen's journey is now more than a story of fame. It is a reflection of the best and worst parts of country music itself. A small-town dreamer who became a global star, he also became a lightning rod for debate that still burns years after that fateful night. Love him or criticize him, one truth remains undeniable: Morgan Wallen reshaped country music not only with his voice, but with the storm that followed him. Jason Aldean carved out his place in country music with an unmistakable formula: small-town pride, blue-collar grit, and electrifying stadium anthems that blurred the boundaries between country and rock. Born in Georgia, he rose steadily through Nashville's competitive landscape, delivering hit after hit with songs like Dirt Road Anthem and My Kind of Party. For nearly 2 decades, he stood tall as a symbol of rural American identity, drawing massive crowds whose lives and values were echoed in his music. But beneath that success, Aldean's career was never free from controversy. And in 2023, he ignited one of the biggest cultural firestorms country music had seen in years. The release of Try That in a Small Town began as a message of unity and self-defense, at least in Aldean's eyes. Yet once the music video surfaced, everything changed. Shot in front of a courthouse tied to a painful legacy of racial violence, and intercut with imagery of protests and urban unrest, the video became a lightning rod for national outrage. Critics accused Aldean of leaning into coded messaging, glorifying vigilantism, and exploiting America's deepest divides. What to some seemed like a simple affirmation of community values felt to others like a deliberate provocation. Supporters, however, rallied instantly. They argued the song defended law, order, and the quiet dignity of small towns under pressure from forces they felt misunderstood by coastal media. Aldean himself pushed back hard, insisting the song wasn't about race or politics, but about neighbors protecting neighbors. He claimed the outrage was manufactured, not genuine, a misinterpretation of a message he believed was universal. The debate grew so intense that some radio stations briefly pulled the track, while others used it to energize listeners who felt cultural tension rising nationwide. Aldean suddenly found himself transformed into both a patriotic symbol and a political target, depending entirely on who was watching. Though the uproar felt like a turning point, Aldean had long been known for his unapologetic demeanor. His blunt honesty, his traditional masculine image, and his refusal to capitulate to critics were the very qualities that made him beloved by millions and polarizing to many others. In an era of heightened sensitivity, his confidence read as courage to some and defiance to others. Yet the numbers spoke for themselves. Despite the controversy, or because of it, Try That in a Small Town climbed the charts. Concert crowds sang louder than ever, reaffirming his stronghold on the country heartland. The backlash did not break him, it solidified him. Jason Aldean's story illustrates how deeply intertwined music and identity have become in modern America. How a single song can inspire pride and provoke fury at the same time. And how, through every storm, Aldean has remained unwavering, loyal to his roots, his beliefs, and the people who have stood with him since the beginning. Toby Keith was one of the most unmistakable figures in country music, loud, larger than life, and unapologetically proud of where he came from. With his deep Oklahoma drawl and no-nonsense approach to storytelling, he became the voice of the American everyman. Rising to fame in the 1990s with songs like Should Have Been a Cowboy, Keith quickly built a reputation for blending rough-edged patriotism with a blue-collar sensitivity that resonated deeply with millions. His concerts were rowdy, defiant, and full of heart, exactly the way his fans loved him. But the world changed after 9/11, and Toby Keith changed with it. In 2002, he released what would become one of the most controversial songs in country music history, courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, The Angry American. Fueled by grief and outrage, the song captured the fury of a wounded nation. Its infamous line, "We'll put a boot in your ass, it's the American way," turned Keith into a patriotic firebrand overnight. To many, the song was a rallying cry, an anthem that said what people were too shocked or afraid to express. But to others, it was inflammatory, overly aggressive, and dangerously simplistic. Critics accused him of exploiting national trauma. Supporters praised him for his honesty and courage. The divide was instant, emotional, and impossible to ignore. This tension reached a boiling point when Natalie Maines of the Chicks publicly criticized the song, calling it ignorant. What followed became one of the most infamous feuds in country music. Keith retaliated by projecting her photo alongside Saddam Hussein during his concerts, a provocative move that escalated their conflict and drew the entire industry into the fight. The feud revealed more than creative differences. It exposed a cultural rift tearing across America. Fans chose sides, media outlets dissected every exchange, and the argument over what true patriotism looked like spread far beyond country music. Keith didn't retreat or soften his stance. If anything, the criticism made him double down. Defiance became his brand. Outside of politics, Toby Keith was also a shrewd businessman. He launched a restaurant chain, a beer brand, and even a record label, expanding his empire far beyond music. Yet even as he grew wealthier and more influential, controversy never left his side. Whether he was defending military families, clashing with other artists, or calling out the industry, Keith always embraced confrontation rather than shying away from it. To fans, he was authentic, a man who spoke his mind without fear. To critics, he was opportunistic, capitalizing on outrage to fuel his fame. But either way, his impact was undeniable. His music became the soundtrack of a fractured era, expressing both pride and pain, unity and division. Toby Keith's legacy is not simple, but it is unforgettable. His voice, his temper, his patriotism, and his fierce conviction shaped a generation of country music. Whether viewed as a hero or a provocateur, he proved that in this genre, emotion can be as explosive as any melody, and one song can change everything. Natalie Maines rose to fame as the fearless voice at the front of the Chicks, one of the most successful boundary-breaking groups in country music history. With her bold personality, powerhouse vocals, and unapologetic confidence, she helped redefine what it meant to be a woman in a genre long dominated by men. The Chicks' early success came from a rare balance of humor, independence, and emotional honesty, and Maines stood at the center of it all. Fans admired her fire. Critics praised her talent. The industry saw her as a symbol of modern country womanhood. But in 2003, everything changed in a single moment. On stage in London, just as the United States prepared to invade Iraq, Maines told the crowd she was ashamed the President of the United States is from Texas. It was a spontaneous remark, one sentence spoken in frustration and fear. Yet within hours, that sentence spiraled into one of the biggest political and cultural controversies the country music world had ever witnessed. Radio stations banned the Chicks almost overnight. Fans gathered to burn their CDs in parking lots. Corporate sponsors severed ties. Fellow artists publicly condemned them. The group that had once been America's sweethearts was suddenly branded traitors by the very audience that had lifted them to fame. Maines refused to back down. She stood by her words, arguing that free speech was not just her right as an artist, but her duty as an American citizen. The backlash, however, was relentless. Threats, humiliation, and an industry-wide freeze-out became the new reality for the Chicks. And yet, they refused to disappear. Instead of retreating, the trio poured the pain into their 2006 album, Taking the Long Way. The record became a cathartic statement of defiance, none more powerful than the song Not Ready to Make Nice. Through its lyrics, Maines confronted the hate, the exhaustion, and the emotional cost of standing up to a furious nation. The album swept the Grammy Awards, 5 wins including Album and Song of the Year, proving that resilience could triumph over condemnation. For Natalie Maines, the controversy became both a burden and a turning point. The outspoken personality that once made her beloved now made her polarizing. Some fans saw her as a courageous truth-teller, a woman strong enough to challenge her own industry. Others never forgave her, convinced she had crossed an unspoken line in country music's patriotic culture. With time, the story evolved. Maines became more than the woman who sparked a national uproar. She became a generational symbol of artistic freedom, a reminder that country music's brightest voices could also be its most rebellious. She inspired younger artists to speak up, challenge norms, and refuse the silence Nashville often demanded. Today, Natalie Maines is remembered for far more than a single statement. She is remembered for her conviction, her resilience, and her willingness to lose everything rather than betray what she believed. Her story proved that music can do more than comfort. It can provoke, challenge, and even ignite a national reckoning. And through it all, Maines never once backed down. Gavin Adcock's arrival in country music was anything but typical. Before he ever stepped into a recording booth, he had already captured the internet's attention through his wild, chaotic, viral antics as a college football player at Georgia Southern University. That energy, raw, reckless, and unfiltered, followed him into his musical career. When he transitioned to country music, he didn't smooth out the edges or reinvent his image. Instead, he doubled down, bringing that same rowdy intensity onto the stage. It made him instantly recognizable in a genre often dominated by polished, media-trained personalities. His rise was quick. Fans gravitated toward his rebellious charm, while critics questioned how long the chaos could last. But as fame grew, the consequences grew with it. And in early 2025, Adcock found himself at the center of a controversy that would define his reputation. When Beyoncé released Cowboy Carter, a groundbreaking project blending country with black musical traditions, many praised it for expanding the genre's identity. Adcock, however, publicly dismissed it with one blunt comment. He didn't consider it country music. The remark, shared across social media within minutes, ignited an immediate firestorm. Critics accused him of racism, ignorance, and gatekeeping, a genre that had long struggled with inclusivity. What should have been a moment of celebration for country's growing diversity instead became a cultural flashpoint, with Adcock standing in the center of it. He tried to clarify, insisting his statement was about preserving traditional sound rather than attacking Beyoncé herself. But the damage was done. His name trended for all the wrong reasons. Promoters began pulling back. Fans argued online about whether his comment reflected honest opinion or something far more harmful. The conversation quickly shifted from Adcock's music to what country music should or shouldn't be. Just when the controversy showed signs of settling, things got worse. A few months later, Adcock was arrested for reckless driving after police reported that he'd been speeding and behaving erratically. The arrest poured gasoline on an already burning reputation. Headlines framed him as out of control, impulsive, and irresponsible, an artist spiraling in real time. For some observers, the chaos felt inevitable. For others, it seemed like a young performer being crushed under the pressure of sudden fame. His fan base split sharply. Supporters claimed he was being unfairly targeted, arguing that free speech and youthful mistakes shouldn't define his entire career. Critics countered that his pattern of behavior proved he wasn't ready for the spotlight he'd been given. Through it all, Gavin Adcock became a symbol of something much larger, the volatile nature of modern fame. One viral moment can rocket someone into celebrity status, and one careless comment can tear it all apart. His story is a cautionary tale about impulsiveness in the age of social media, where every sentence is permanent and every mistake becomes global within seconds. Whether Gavin Adcock rebounds or fades into a footnote of country music history remains to be seen. But his rise and rapid unraveling forced the genre to confront old questions once again. Who gets to define country music? Who is allowed inside its circle? And how quickly can a star burn out when controversy overshadows the music? Marin Morris entered Nashville as a breath of fresh air, a bold, Texas-born singer-songwriter with a voice that cut through the noise and a confidence that made her impossible to ignore. Early hits like My Church and 80s Mercedes signaled that she wasn't interested in fitting neatly into any one mold. She blended traditional country storytelling with pop brightness and lyrical introspection, earning Grammys, critical praise, and a rapidly growing fan base. But from the very beginning, Morris carried something more than talent. She carried a conviction that country music could be bigger, more honest, and more inclusive. She spoke openly about the industry's shortcomings, its rigid expectations, its gender inequality, its tendency to silence uncomfortable voices. Her willingness to challenge norms made her both celebrated and targeted. As her influence grew, so did the backlash. Morris's outspoken nature, once embraced as refreshing, became a point of division. She called out what she saw as hypocrisy and exclusion within Nashville, criticizing the resistance to change and the narrow version of country identity that had dominated for decades. Many admired her bravery, viewing her as a rare artist willing to risk her career to push the genre forward. Others accused her of arrogance, claiming she disparaged the very community that gave her success. By 2023, the tension reached its breaking point. In interviews, Morris described mainstream country culture as toxic, expressing frustration at the genre's hostility toward diversity and its intolerance for anyone who dared to challenge tradition. Her words hit like a shockwave. Fans and fellow artists split sharply, some applauding her candor, others condemning her for turning her back on country. For Morris, the backlash didn't prompt retreat, but transformation. Instead of softening her message, she made a drastic decision. She announced she was stepping away from country music entirely, choosing to pursue new creative directions. The reaction was explosive. Supporters hailed it as an act of artistic liberation. Detractors claimed she had betrayed her roots. The debate became a referendum on the future of the genre itself. what country music was, what it should be, and who was allowed to shape it. Despite the chaos, Morris refused to be defined by controversy. Her identity as an artist had never been dependent on approval. She continued making music on her own terms, exploring new sounds and new spaces. She didn't apologize for outgrowing an environment she believed would never fully accept her. Her departure became symbolic, representing a generational shift and a growing divide between tradition and modern values. Marin Morris's journey is more than a personal struggle. It is a reflection of a genre at war with itself. She has become both a lightning rod and a trailblazer, a figure who forces country music to confront its own contradictions. Her voice, whether loved or criticized, has remained unwavering, bold, emotional, and uncompromisingly honest. And her legacy leaves the genre with a lingering question: can someone who insists on change ever truly belong in a place built to resist it? Long before he became a household name, he was already astonishing audiences with his guitar skills, effortless, precise, and unmistakably his own. Born in West Virginia, Paisley grew up steeped in small-town values and country traditions, performing from a young age and revealing a gift that would eventually place him among country music's most respected artists. His early albums struck a delicate balance between sincerity and playfulness. One moment, he could write a song that brought listeners to tears. The next, he'd release a witty track that showcased his sharp comedic timing. Fans admired him not just for his talent, but for his grounded, down-to-earth personality. By the 2010s, Brad Paisley had become a bona fide icon, someone who seemed almost immune to the darker controversies that swirled around other country stars. But in 2013, Paisley took a creative risk that would test his relationship with fans and critics alike. He released Accidental Racist, a duet with LL Cool J that attempted to address racial misunderstanding in America through a fictional dialogue between a white Southerner and a black man. On paper, the idea was ambitious, an attempt to bridge divides and confront uncomfortable history. In reality, the song detonated a national debate. Critics argued that the lyrics reduced complex racial issues into overly simplistic metaphors. Social media erupted, mocking the song and dissecting every line. Even longtime fans struggled to defend it, grappling with the gap between Paisley's intentions and the song's execution. Paisley, however, didn't back away from the controversy. In interviews, he remained calm and thoughtful, explaining that the point of the song wasn't to solve racism, but to initiate a difficult conversation. He acknowledged that maybe the message got lost, but insisted that his intentions had always been sincere. That humility, his willingness to admit imperfection without abandoning the goal, reflected the core of who he was as an artist. Though the song didn't destroy his career, it marked a visible shift. From that point on, Paisley became more careful when approaching sensitive topics. Yet he never abandoned his optimism or his sense of humor. He continued to write, tour, mentor young artists, and use his influence for charitable work. While some critics accused him of playing it safe, others saw his restraint as wisdom, proof that he had learned from the moment rather than run from it. Beyond the backlash, Brad Paisley remained a figure defined not by controversy, but by sincerity. His career stands as a reminder that even good intentions can lead to missteps, and that art, especially art that aims to confront sensitive issues, can be messy, imperfect, and deeply human. Accidental Racist became part of his story, not because it destroyed him, but because it tested him. And Brad Paisley showed that he could stumble, listen, and continue forward with the same warmth and authenticity that made him beloved in the first place. An Oklahoma kid with a commanding voice who quickly became one of the most recognizable figures in modern country music. His debut single, Austin, didn't just introduce him to the world, it skyrocketed him into fame, proving he had the rare ability to blend vulnerability with commercial appeal. Over the next 2 decades, Shelton became a staple of country radio and television, embodying a new era of country music that stayed true to tradition while appealing to the mainstream. But behind the jokes, the charm, and the easygoing smile that made him a fan favorite on The Voice, Shelton's public persona was often shadowed by controversy. In 2016, that shadow grew much darker when old tweets resurfaced. Tweets filled with offensive jokes about women, Muslims, and the LGBTQ+ community. What he once brushed off as crude humor from another era suddenly appeared deeply insensitive in a world that had changed dramatically. As the tweets spread, debates ignited across social media and the entertainment industry. Were these comments reflections of the real Blake Shelton, or were they simply the reckless attempts at humor of a younger, less careful man? The backlash forced Shelton to issue a public apology, admitting the tweets were dumb jokes and insisting he never meant to harm anyone. Some accepted the apology, others saw it as damage control. But this wasn't the first time Shelton's unfiltered nature had caused trouble. Throughout his career, he gained a reputation for blunt honesty that often blurred the line between playful banter and genuine offense. He teased fellow artists, clashed publicly with critics, and seemed to embrace the role of country music's outspoken troublemaker. Yet paradoxically, these same qualities made him relatable to millions. His lack of pretense, his willingness to say exactly what he thought, was part of the charm that kept audiences tuned in. Shelton's personal life only added fuel to the fascination. His highly publicized marriage and divorce from Miranda Lambert, followed by his relationship with Gwen Stefani, kept tabloids spinning. Fans and critics dissected every development. Some accused him of moving on too quickly, while others applauded his transparency and refusal to hide behind a perfectly crafted PR image. Through it all, Shelton remained remarkably consistent. He joked about fame, embraced controversy with a shrug, and leaned on humor as both shield and identity. "If you can laugh at yourself before everyone else does," he once said, "you'll be all right." That philosophy became the backbone of his resilience. Despite the missteps, the storms, and the public scrutiny, Blake Shelton continued releasing hits, filling arenas, and maintaining a devoted fan base. His story is a reflection of what it means to be a celebrity in the digital age, where every mistake becomes a headline, but authenticity can still win hearts. Blake Shelton's legacy isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, owning the flaws, and continuing to sing even when the world watches with judgment. In country music, survival often depends on staying real, and Shelton, for better or worse, never tried to be anything else. Jason Isbell built his name not through flash or commercial formulas, but through raw honesty and some of the most emotionally profound songwriting the country and Americana world had seen in decades. Born in Alabama, he first caught attention during his years with Drive-By Truckers, where his songwriting hinted at a rare emotional intelligence hidden beneath the band's southern rock grit. Even then, Isbell wrote like someone who'd lived 100 different lives, each lyric carrying weight, vulnerability, and truth. When he left the band to begin his solo career, those qualities only deepened. His 2013 album Southeastern transformed him from a respected musician into a generational storyteller. Drawing from battles with addiction, recovery, and personal reckoning, the album resonated like a confession, raw, unfiltered, and painfully human. Critics hailed it as a masterpiece. Fans embraced him as something different from Nashville's polished mainstream. An artist who refused to hide behind facade or genre expectations. But Isbell's commitment to honesty didn't stop at his music. He became equally outspoken about the social and political issues he believed were poisoning the country, and, at times, the country music industry itself. In a genre where politeness and silence about controversial topics were often unspoken rules, Isbell shattered them. He spoke publicly about race, inequality, and the cultural divides shaping America. For some, this made him a hero, a rare voice pushing back against complacency and calling attention to the consequences of staying quiet. For others, it made him a nuisance, even a traitor. Fans who once praised his emotional depth turned on him for his progressive views. Fellow artists bristled when he criticized the industry's unwillingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Nashville's conservative core saw him less as a poet and more as an agitator. Isbell didn't stop. His social media presence became both an extension of his art and a source of controversy. He called out hypocrisy, challenged other artists, and tackled issues that many country stars avoided for fear of backlash. Some labeled him self-righteous or arrogant. Others saw him as one of the few willing to risk his career to speak honestly. Yet through every argument and every headline, his music continued to evolve. Albums like Something More Than Free and Reunions proved that he could balance personal storytelling with societal reflection. His lyrics explored responsibility, empathy, and the complicated journey of becoming a better version of oneself. Critics consistently praised him as one of his generation's sharpest writers, a man who could turn personal struggle into universal truth. Jason Isbell's career stands as proof that country and Americana music can be more than nostalgia or escapism. It can confront, provoke, and force listeners to examine themselves. He may never fit neatly into Nashville's expectations. He was never meant to, but his influence reaches far beyond the city's limits. Whether viewed as a hero or a heretic, Jason Isbell remains one of the most vital voices in modern American music. Through his songs and his defiant honesty, he keeps pushing the genre to reflect not just where it's been, but where it's going, and the difficult conversations it can no longer avoid. Miranda Lambert has always been a force of nature, a woman who walked into country music not to fit in, but to shake the walls. Born in Texas, she first captured national attention on Nashville Star, where she proved she wasn't just another hopeful contestant. She had fire. She had grit. And above all, she had something country music desperately needed: a voice unafraid to tell the truth, no matter how sharp it sounded. Her debut album, Kerosene, set the tone for everything that would follow. Lambert wrote with the rawness of someone who refused to hide behind polite metaphors. Her storytelling explored heartbreak, revenge, survival, and the complicated emotions of womanhood. Over the years, she created a catalog filled with vulnerability and steel, songs that made listeners feel both the sting and the strength of her honesty. Albums like Revolution and The Weight of These Wings showed a depth that set her apart in an industry that often expected women to smile, sing sweetly, and stay quiet. But Lambert never stayed quiet. And her refusal to soften herself made her both beloved and controversial. Public feuds, blunt interviews, and a fiery temperament became as much a part of her reputation as her music. Her high-profile marriage and divorce from Blake Shelton turned her personal life into a tabloid spectacle, dissected endlessly by fans and critics. Supporters saw her as fiercely authentic. Detractors accused her of being combative and difficult. The tension surrounding her image escalated in 2023 during one of her concerts, a moment that would ignite viral debate across social media. In the middle of a song, Lambert suddenly stopped performing to call out a group of fans who were taking selfies instead of watching the show. The frustration in her voice was unmistakable. Within hours, the clip spread everywhere. Some applauded her, arguing she was defending the sanctity of live music in a world glued to screens. Others accused her of being unprofessional, rude, and ungrateful. The incident became a cultural flashpoint, raising questions about how artists and audiences should connect in an age defined by smartphones and social media. Lambert didn't apologize. She stood firm, insisting that concerts were meant to be shared experiences, not photo ops. Her reaction echoed the authenticity that has defined her entire career. Lambert has always demanded respect for the craft, for the music, and for the moment. Even when critics accused her of having a temper, her fans saw a woman unwilling to compromise what she believed in. Over time, Miranda Lambert has come to embody both the power and the price of being unapologetically yourself. She has never diluted her emotions, her opinions, or her truth to make others comfortable. Her music thrives because she brings all of herself, messy, passionate, unfiltered, to everything she does. Whether praised or criticized, whether held up as an icon or scrutinized as a troublemaker, Lambert remains one of the most influential voices in modern country music. Her authenticity is her armor, her weapon, and the very thing that has kept her at the top for decades. She has proven one thing beyond any doubt. In a world full of polite facades, being real